Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of research from the journal Business Ethics and Leadership. We are going to separate the philosophy from the reality of the glass ceiling, and we're going to do it using hard data, structured analysis, and actionable insights.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. For years, there's been this ongoing philosophical debate in the corporate world. You've probably heard it. Some argue that the glass ceiling is essentially a self-imposed idea. You know, a myth created in the minds of women as an excuse for why they aren't reaching their absolute full career potential. But the core question we need to ask, and really what this entire research investigates, is whether that actually holds up against the evidence. Are we looking at an internal crisis of confidence, or is this a very real, highly quantifiable institutional reality that objectively limits career advancement?
So, to get to the absolute bottom of this, we first need to clearly define what we're talking about. The glass ceiling is officially defined in this literature as an invisible barrier preventing women from ascending in their careers. But, as you might guess, the reality of what actually constructs that barrier is incredibly complex. The research notes that this ceiling is forged from a whole mix of institutional obstacles, unconscious bias, and deeply ingrained gender stereotypes. It's like a giant web encompassing external threats from workplace culture, societal expectations, and yes, even internal barriers like self-fulfilling prophecies or imposter syndrome.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the invisible barrier. Second, decoding the wage gap. Third, the diversity advantage. And finally, strategies for change. Section 1. The invisible barrier.
The day-to-day reality of these unconscious biases is, frankly, stark. The source text highlights a completely everyday scenario that brilliantly illustrates this. Imagine a working mother arriving late after dropping her kids off at school. More often than not, she receives critical comments. It's viewed as a distraction from her job. Conversely, if a working father does the exact same thing, workplace culture often actively affirms him, labeling him a great dad. This kind of harsh double standard means that even when they are working the exact same position at a company, men and women tend to have vastly different and often discouraging daily work experiences.
This immense pressure manifests in what researchers actually call respectable femininity. Because women are so often a minority in top management, they face intense, unrelenting scrutiny. There are these deeply embedded notions of what masculine leadership is supposed to look like, which forces women into a career-limiting power struggle. They have to constantly control their appearance and actions just to reflect male expectations. A Stanford study highlighted in the text even found that to glean managerial interest, females often have to act more masculine, being highly aggressive or assertive. But doing so while trying to somehow maintain this respectable femininity leads to immense internal turmoil and cognitive dissonance. It is literally a lose-lose balancing act.
Section 2. Decoding the wage gap.
Now, historically, one of the main arguments used to explain away the wage gap was a disparity in education. But looking at the global data on years of schooling, there has been a massive historical narrowing and, in some regions, a complete reversal of the education gap. Women are catching up and, in many cases, outright surpassing men in quantitative educational attainment and years of schooling. Logically, you'd think this tremendous surge in education would have completely closed the financial disparities, right? And yet, bam, we hit a massive paradox. Despite these immense educational gains, women still face a 24.1% unadjusted pay gap. To put that into perspective, that means on average, women account for only 76 cents on every single dollar that men earn. And this isn't just in certain fields. Jobs like computer programmers, dentists, and C-suite executives all have pay gaps higher than 16%. So if education isn't the sole equalizer we thought it was, what on earth is really going on with the numbers here? Well, the debate around statistical manipulation is highly complex. When we look at the data, the unadjusted wage gap, represented by the blue figures, compares all male and female workers without considering differences in age, expertise, or industry. Then, if we adjust for human capital like education and experience, we get the red metrics. Finally, the green represents the fully adjusted wage gap, controlling for a full range of covariates like occupation, region, and race. Depending entirely on which set of data you look at, you can argue very different realities about just how severe the pay gap actually is. It is absolutely critical to distinguish between these adjusted and unadjusted metrics because it completely frames the policy response. Now, while the gap is indeed shrinking, thanks largely to that amazing rise in education we saw a minute ago, the unadjusted ratio still sits at 79.3%, and even the fully adjusted ratio leaves a near 9% totally unexplained residual gap.
What's more, the data reveals that the rate at which this gap is shrinking has actually slowed down significantly in recent years. In fact, at the current pace, the institute cited in the text suggests the wage gap wouldn't fully close until the year 2059. No way we should be waiting that long.
Section 3. The diversity advantage.
Okay, this number should make any focused learner or business leader immediately sit up and take notice. The research demonstrates, without a doubt, that diversity within the boardroom yields massive dividends. Specifically, companies that have women on their boards see a 36% better return on equity. 36%! This completely reframes the entire conversation. Hiring and promoting women isn't just about checking boxes, avoiding public disdain, or preventing class action lawsuits over unequal pay. It is a highly lucrative competitive advantage. So, the crucial point is why this happens. The literature shows that female managers frequently utilize what is known as a transformational leadership style. This approach involves high emotional intelligence, empathy, continuous quality training, and really emotionally aligning a leader's vision with their supporters' values. Studies across multiple industries show this exact style positively correlates with much higher employee engagement, lower turnover, and greater overall job satisfaction. Empowering female leaders doesn't just look good on paper. It fundamentally drives sustainable organizational growth right from the inside out.
Section 4. Strategies for change.
To actually dismantle this glass ceiling, organizations desperately need a feedback-rich environment. The research outlines 3 specific communication strategies that leaders can adopt today. First up, listen to understand, not just to respond. Don't just sit there waiting for your turn to speak. Try to genuinely understand the employee's perspective. Second, stay curious about unexpected ideas. Instead of just shutting down a proposal because it doesn't fit the usual majority groupthink, ask questions, lean into it. And third, manage your intent versus your impact. A manager really has to realize their words might land completely differently than they intended. Self-evaluation just isn't enough. You must actively collect feedback from women in your company. Zooming out structurally, the text highlights 3 major cornerstones for cultivating female leadership. First, inclusivity has to be a top-down corporate focus. It needs to be woven directly into the company's DNA. Second, you have to get managers on board. This means actively training managers to recognize their own unconscious biases and ensuring they're providing the exact same caliber of feedback to women as they do to men. Finally, inspiring women to be in the game to win. The data shows a really fascinating point. High-potential women are often over-mentored but severely under-sponsored. Organizations need to actively encourage women to build strategic career plans, network densely, and confidently pursue those internal promotions.
If there is one core thesis to take away from this entire explainer, it is beautifully summarized right here. The glass ceiling is detrimental to both the economic development of women and the companies that employ them. Organizations shouldn't view the push for gender equality as some annoying compliance headache. Instead, they should see it as an unprecedented opportunity to gain a competitive edge and radically improve their overall organizational performance.
I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. We've seen the psychological barriers, we've completely decoded the statistical reality of the wage gap, and we've seen the undeniable 36% return on equity that comes directly from diverse leadership. So, I encourage you to take a hard look at your own workplace. Knowing the data, is your organization unknowingly building a glass ceiling, or are you actively laying an inclusive foundation for sustainable growth?